On the cold, damp night of March 18, 1994, Lily, a promising biochemistry student at Harvard, vanished without a trace as she walked home from the library. 3 days later, her lifeless body was discovered in a secluded woodland area just outside Cambridge, bound, meticulously arranged, and eerily serene. Clutched in her right hand was a black chess pawn, its gleaming surface sending a chilling message to investigators. The autopsy revealed a lethal dose of potassium chloride, injected with surgical precision, indicating the killer's advanced knowledge of medical techniques. The scene was deliberate, a macabre display. Lily's clothing was pristine, unsoiled by the damp earth beneath her, a stark anomaly for someone left in the open woods. Her skirt's pleats were sharp, her blouse pressed and neat, details that suggested a chilling post-mortem care. She had been redressed with precision, as if the killer wished to showcase their work. Her body, arranged on a bed of moss, rested in a pose so unervingly serene it almost looked deliberate. The knot that bound her hands with smooth nylon rope was expertly tied, betraying the meticulous nature of its maker. There were no signs of struggle. Lily's nails were unbroken, her palms unmarked, suggesting she had either been subdued without resistance or never given the chance to fight back. Her killer had been precise, leaving no fingerprints, no DNA, no trace of their presence other than the haunting tableau they had constructed. Yet it was the black chess pawn, delicately clutched between her fingers, that transfixed the investigators. It gleamed unnaturally in the dim light, as if daring anyone to decipher its cryptic meaning. This seemingly insignificant piece from a chess game, a pawn, small, humble, now held an unsettling significance. It felt like a taunt, a calling card from a mind that saw murder not as an emotional act, but as an intellectual pursuit. The autopsy deepened the sense of calculated horror. Lily had been injected with potassium chloride, a lethal compound known for its use in lethal injections. The chemical halted her heart swiftly and mercilessly. The injection site, concealed behind her ear, showed the care and precision of someone with medical expertise. Time of death was estimated at midnight, a detail that added an eerie, almost symbolic layer to the case. Midnight, the hour of transitions, felt too deliberate, too purposeful, as if the killer had chosen it to emphasize some dark philosophy. The investigation stalled with no tangible evidence. The rain had wiped clean any footprints, and the damp conditions thwarted attempts to gather fibers or trace evidence. It was as though Lily's body had simply appeared there, placed by an invisible hand. The chess pawn remained the focal point of the investigation, a piece in a game that tested wit and strategy. It suggested a killer who viewed human life as nothing more than a strategic move. This was no crime of passion or opportunity. It was a calculated move in a twisted game, where Lily was not a victim, but a pawn sacrificed in some larger scheme. A chilling realization began to sink in for the investigators. This was not the act of someone driven by rage or desperation. This was the work of a mind that saw life itself as a game to be played. Months passed with little progress in Lily's murder, and a pall of frustration hung heavily over the investigation. Leads evaporated as quickly as they emerged, and the case seemed destined to fade into obscurity, until an envelope, unmarked and mysterious, arrived at the Cambridge Police Department. Its cream-colored surface was pristine, its edges sharp, giving the impression of deliberate, almost obsessive care. Detectives gathered around as the envelope was opened. Inside was a single sheet of heavy parchment paper, the kind used for formal correspondence, exuding an unsettling elegance. The letter, penned in exquisite calligraphy, was as much a work of art as it was a taunt. Each letter flowed seamlessly into the next, the ink a deep, unyielding black that seemed to pierce the page. The message it carried was as haunting as its presentation. In precise detail, it chronicled Lily's abduction and murder, outlining her final hours with chilling detachment. Yet, instead of offering answers, The letter presented a series of riddles, their meanings as opaque as the mind that conceived them. They were labyrinthine in complexity, weaving mathematical equations with philosophical allusions to figures like Socrates and Nietzsche. Ancient texts were referenced, their wisdom twisted into enigmatic puzzles that seemed to mock the investigator's intellect. At the bottom of the letter, just beneath the final riddle, was a signature, Rex Lucas. The Latin phrase, translating to King of Light, felt both regal and foreboding, a moniker that hinted at the writer's sense of superiority and self-perceived enlightenment. Detectives pored over the riddles, desperate for a lead. They mapped equations, deciphered Latin phrases, and consulted experts in ancient philosophy, only to find themselves circling back to the same vexing conclusion. The riddles were designed not to reveal truth, but to showcase the brilliance of their creator. They were a message, not of cooperation, but of domination. The letter quickly became a subject of media frenzy. Journalists and amateur sleuths dissected every word, turning the cryptic riddles into a national obsession. The chilling precision of the letter, coupled with the audacity of its sender, captured public imagination. Soon, the press gave the killer a name, the Chessmaster. The moniker was no coincidence. Investigators had already drawn connections between Lily's murder and the black pawn found in her hand. The chessmaster's deliberate choice of a chess piece, and now this letter, suggested a mind that reveled in strategy, one that saw the world not as a chaotic landscape but as a carefully constructed game. It became clear that this was no ordinary offender. The chessmaster was not driven by impulse or fleeting emotion, but by an extraordinary intellect and a chilling, calculated purpose. The letter was their move in a grand game, a challenge thrown down before the world. Each word, each riddle, each flourish of the pen seemed to whisper the same message: catch me if you can. The chessmaster had elevated their crimes to an intellectual performance, a dark theater in which they held the audience captive. For the detectives who received that first letter, it was not just a clue, it was an invitation to play. The chessmaster's sinister game continued over the next 2 years, claiming 3 more victims in its calculated progression. Each murder was as chillingly precise as the first, leaving behind an air of cruel sophistication that both baffled and taunted investigators. The victims, like Lily, were all young, brilliant individuals at the peak of their potential, rising stars in their respective fields. Their shared traits of intellect and promise only deepened the mystery of why they were chosen to be pawns in this deadly game. The second victim, 25-year-old Sarah, a rising mathematician with a gift for unraveling abstract puzzles, was found in a secluded park just outside New Haven. She had been bound with the same nylon rope, her body left unervingly pristine. In her lifeless hand, she held a white bishop, its polished surface gleaming under the dim winter light. To detectives, the chess piece seemed to mock their inability to protect another bright mind. Months later, the third victim surfaced. Marcus, a 28-year-old composer celebrated for his groundbreaking symphonies, was discovered in a quiet garden in Chicago. Like the others, he bore no signs of a struggle. His death had been administered with the same lethal injection, the mark concealed expertly. In his hand was a black knight, a symbol steeped in complexity and movement, as though the killer sought to convey some twisted narrative through these tokens. The fourth victim, Elena, was the most haunting discovery yet. A 31-year-old physicist who had just published a paper on quantum mechanics that was making waves in the scientific community, Elena was found in the remote desert outskirts of Phoenix. Her body was laid out with almost reverent care, and in her grasp was a white rook. The stark, blocky piece seemed to stand sentinel over the tragic scene, a silent witness to the horror that had unfolded. The symbolism of the chess pieces was undeniable, yet it remained maddeningly elusive. Each piece was carefully selected, its placement deliberate. Detectives debated endlessly over the significance. Were the victims being used to reenact a specific game? Was the chess master choosing pieces based on some personal philosophy? Or was it all part of an intricate riddle meant to stall and frustrate those hunting them? Despite their best efforts, the police were left grasping at shadows. Each crime scene was immaculate, almost as if it had been sterilized by the killer's exacting hands. There were no stray fibers, no smudged fingerprints, no stray hairs to point investigators toward a suspect. Even the chess pieces, potential treasure troves of forensic evidence, were devoid of DNA or identifying marks. The level of meticulousness was unlike anything the investigators had encountered before. The chessmaster's ability to execute these crimes with such precision and leave nothing behind was a testament to their frightening intelligence and unrelenting discipline. Seasoned detectives, hardened by years of confronting humanity's darkest impulses, found themselves rattled by the perfection of these murders. The lack of progress gnawed at the investigative team, the weight of their failure compounding with each new victim. Public pressure mounted, and whispers of the chessmaster's brilliance began to circulate, feeding their twisted ego from the shadows. It was as if the killer was always 2 moves ahead, watching and waiting as the authorities struggled to piece together a puzzle with missing parts. In the eyes of the chessmaster, this was no mere killing spree. It was a masterpiece in progress, a grand game of intellect and control where the stakes were lives, and every move was calculated with chilling precision. In 1997, the chessmaster escalated their game with a move that would shift the entire investigation. A 5th letter arrived, but this time it was not addressed to the police at large. It was meant for Detective Margot. The envelope, as always, was immaculate, its contents a testament to the killer's signature blend of intellect and theatrics. Margot felt her pulse quicken as she unfolded the letter. Written in the same elegant calligraphy as the earlier correspondence, it was as much a challenge as it was a provocation. The message contained a set of precise coordinates, cryptic in their stark simplicity, but unmistakably pointing to a location in New York City. Intrigued and wary, Margot and her team followed the lead, arriving at the grandiose halls of the New York Public Library. The coordinates led them to a specific section deep within the labyrinthine stacks. Philosophy. Margot's fingers trembled as she pulled the designated book from the shelf, a worn volume on existential thought. Inside, folded neatly between the fragile pages, was a single sheet of paper bearing another message from the chessmaster. Even kings fall when the game is played to its conclusion, it read. The words carried the weight of inevitability, an almost poetic nod to the endgame of chess and life itself. Beneath the ominous phrase was a chessboard diagram, meticulously sketched and immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with the game. Margot, a lifelong chess enthusiast, felt a cold chill creep up her spine as she studied the diagram. The arrangement of the pieces wasn't arbitrary. It depicted a nearly completed game, one that was famous in chess circles. Margot realized with mounting dread that the board showed a forced checkmate in 3 moves. It was a brilliant, ruthless strategy, one that left no possibility of escape for the opponent. But what did it mean? The letter's cryptic nature gnawed at her. The diagram seemed to hint at the killer's next move, yet its abstraction made it impossible to decipher in time. Margot could feel the weight of the chessmaster's intellect bearing down on her, a mocking reminder of how far ahead they always seemed to be. The answer came a month later, but it was not the one Margot had hoped for. In a quiet Philadelphia apartment, the body of 29-year-old Simon was discovered. A chess grandmaster renowned for his tactical brilliance, Simon had been the latest victim in the chessmaster's macabre game. He was found in the same meticulous manner as the others, bound, injected with potassium chloride, and eerily unmarked by any signs of struggle. Clutched in his hand was the piece that completed the chessmaster's cryptic tableau, a black queen. Its dark, polished surface seemed to absorb the dim light of the room, an ominous symbol of the calculated mind that had claimed yet another life. The queen, powerful and versatile on the chessboard, seemed to speak of dominance and inevitability, a chilling reminder that the chessmaster was still in control. For Margot, the discovery was both devastating and maddening. The letter had contained a clue, but it had been too abstract, too layered in the killer's twisted intellect to save Simon. Once again, the chessmaster had played their hand flawlessly, leaving the authorities chasing shadows. As Margot stared at the Black Queen, a wave of determination surged within her. She vowed that this piece would be the last in the chessmaster's game, the final move before they were brought to justice. Criminal profilers tasked with unraveling the psyche of the chessmaster painted a chilling portrait of a mind driven by arrogance and obsession. This was no ordinary killer acting on impulse or rage. The chessmaster was a narcissist with a god complex, someone who viewed their gruesome acts not as crimes but as intellectual performances. Each murder was a carefully planned move in a grand, twisted game where the board was life itself, and the players were unknowing participants in a match they could never win. The chess pieces left at each crime scene were not mere tokens. They were symbols of control, precision, and strategy. To the chessmaster, each victim was a pawn, not in the traditional sense of insignificance, but as critical pieces in a larger, deliberate narrative. The placement of each piece was methodical, imbued with meaning that only they could fully grasp, leaving investigators to puzzle over the killer's ultimate endgame. But one question gnawed at the minds of detectives and profilers alike. Why target such extraordinary individuals? Each victim had been a luminary in their field. The chessmaster's first victim, Lily, was a gifted scientist poised to revolutionize biochemistry. Sarah, the second, was a mathematician whose breakthroughs were reshaping the field of applied algorithms. Marcus, the composer, had been hailed as a prodigy destined to define the next era of classical music. Elena, the physicist, had just unlocked new frontiers in quantum theory. And Simon, the final victim to date, was a chess grandmaster whose tactical genius rivaled the world's best. This was no random selection. The chessmaster's choice of victims seemed deliberate, almost reverential, as though they were hand-picking society's brightest stars for their macabre tableau. But why extinguish such brilliance? Speculation ran rampant. Some theorized that the chessmaster sought to challenge themselves, testing their wits against the sharpest minds to prove their intellectual superiority. Others suggested a more sinister motive, that the chessmaster viewed these individuals not as people, but as obstacles or threats, symbols of a mediocrity-free world they sought to construct by elimination. There was a chilling poetry in the pattern. By targeting these high achievers, the chessmaster appeared to position themselves as an omnipotent force, wielding the power of life and death with precision and detachment. Each murder was a calculated move to demonstrate their control over even the most capable, reducing society's brightest to mere pieces in a deadly game. For the investigators, understanding the chessmaster's psychology was both the key to catching them and the greatest source of frustration. They were dealing with an individual who valued intellect above all else, someone who killed not out of hatred or desire, but from a perverse need to assert dominance. To the chessmaster, life was a game of strategy, and each victim a necessary sacrifice in their quest to prove that they were, indeed, the master of it all. By 2001, the chessmaster's deadly game seemed to have reached an unceremonious stalemate. Leads had dried up, and the once feverish pursuit of justice was reduced to little more than a cold file collecting dust in the precinct's archives. But as technology advanced, so did the tools of forensic science, and with them came a breakthrough that would breathe new life into the investigation. It was a small discovery, almost imperceptible, but significant: microscopic particles recovered from the chess pieces left at each crime scene. Under the scrutiny of new trace analysis techniques, these particles were identified as remnants of a rare varnish. This varnish, as it turned out, was used exclusively by a boutique chess manufacturer in Prague, a niche brand known only to the most dedicated chess enthusiasts. The revelation was both exhilarating and perplexing. The chessmaster's attention to detail had bordered on obsessive, their crime scenes immaculate and devoid of physical evidence. And yet, this Vanish was a tangible thread, a minute oversight that opened a new avenue of investigation. Digging into the boutique manufacturer's records revealed another tantalizing clue: a purchase made in 1993 under a pseudonym. The order had been placed via mail and shipped to an address in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Further inquiries narrowed the field of suspects to an elite circle of individuals, a network of intellectuals and prodigies linked to Harvard University. Margot's team turned its attention to Harvard's biochemistry program, given the forensic precision of the murders. The list of potential suspects was long, filled with brilliant minds and unblemished academic records. But one name leapt off the page: Adam. Adam was no ordinary alumnus. A child prodigy with a genius-level IQ, he had graduated from Harvard at just 19, leaving behind a trail of astonished professors and groundbreaking research. Yet, for all his brilliance, Adam was a mystery. Following his academic success, he had retreated from public life, becoming a reclusive researcher whose work, while lauded, was shrouded in secrecy. Margot's first impression of Adam was unsettling. His record was spotless, his reputation impeccable, but his demeanor raised questions. Adam's life was defined by structure and precision, much like the chessmaster's murders. He moved through the world with an air of calculated detachment, his enigmatic persona leaving those who encountered him unsure whether they were speaking to a visionary or a sociopath. As Margot delved deeper into Adam's history, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. His brilliance, his aloofness, his capacity for meticulous planning, all of it fit the profile. And yet, despite the mounting suspicion, there was no concrete evidence linking him to the murders. Adam remained, for now, a specter hovering just beyond Margot's grasp. But Margot knew one thing with certainty: the chessmaster's next move was inevitable. And when it came, she would be ready. When Margot finally sat across from Adam in the quiet, sterile confines of the interview room, she was struck by his unnerving composure. He exuded an air of calm that bordered on mechanical, his every word measured and deliberate. Adam spoke with a cool eloquence, answering questions with precision while revealing nothing of himself. His demeanor was detached, as though he were an observer rather than the subject of a murder investigation. Margot pressed him on his whereabouts the night Lily was murdered, but Adam had an alibi so watertight it was almost maddening. Witnesses, receipts, and timestamps formed an impenetrable shield around him, leaving no room for doubt. Yet, Margot couldn't shake the feeling that his confidence stemmed not from innocence, but from the certainty that he had planned for this exact moment. A visit to Adam's home provided no further clarity, only more questions. The house was immaculate, each room painstakingly organized to the point of sterility. Books were lined up by size and color, furniture was arranged with geometric precision, and not a single object appeared out of place. Yet something vital was missing: humanity. There were no photographs, no personal mementos, no hint of a life lived beyond research and routine. Margot's team found no diaries, no correspondence, and most curiously, no chessboard, an absence that seemed almost deliberate. It was as though Adam had erased every trace of himself, leaving behind only the shell of a man who had mastered the art of concealment. The lack of evidence was infuriating. Margot felt like she was circling a fortress, one built not of stone but of intellect and calculation. Adam's apparent perfection only deepened her suspicion. He fit the chessmaster's psychological profile too well: brilliant, aloof, methodical, and eerily detached. Every instinct told Margot that she was staring into the face of the killer, but instinct wasn't enough. Unwilling to let the trail go cold, Margot decided to keep Adam under close surveillance. She knew the chessmaster's game was one of patience and precision, but Margot was just as determined. She would wait, watch, and strike the moment Adam made a mistake. As she left his house that day, the image of Adam's composed face lingered in her mind. He was a puzzle, one she was determined to solve. Because for all his calm, Margot sensed an undercurrent of something darker, a predator's confidence, the assurance of someone who believed he was always 2 steps ahead. But every chess master knows one thing to be true: even the most meticulous strategy can crumble with the right counterplay. And Margot was ready to make her move. In 2004, as the investigation seemed to stall once again, a surprising breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sophie, a young journalist with a growing interest in the case, reached out to Margot with information that could shatter the case wide open. Sophie had been conducting her own research on Adam, preparing a profile on the reclusive genius. Her findings, however, were anything but ordinary. As she sifted through records and interviews, Sophie noticed a disturbing pattern that no one had previously connected. Adam's research trips, the carefully orchestrated jaunts to conferences and symposiums around the world, appeared to coincide with the dates and locations of the murders. This revelation struck like a lightning bolt. It was almost as if Adam had been using his academic travels as a cover for his killing spree. The timing was too perfect, too deliberate to be mere coincidence. But Sophie's investigation didn't end there. She stumbled upon something far more unsettling, a draft of a book Adam had written but never published, titled Endgame: The Philosophy of Sacrifice. Sophie's curiosity piqued, and she delved into the manuscript, finding that it was a chilling manifesto of sorts. The book's abstract explored complex themes of intellectual superiority, the morality of sacrifice, and the dangerous consequences of eliminating what it deemed as mediocrity for the greater good of humanity. The words resonated with disturbing echoes of the murders, particularly the chessmaster's philosophy, a belief that the brilliant, the exceptional, and the enlightened were justified in their acts of dominance over those they deemed inferior. Though Sophie's discoveries were circumstantial, they painted a compelling portrait of Adam, a portrait Margot had been slowly piecing together for years. The book was no longer just a curiosity. It was a blueprint for the killer's twisted ideology, a window into the psyche of a man who saw his victims as pawns in a calculated game of life and death. With this new evidence, Margot knew it was time to make her move. She obtained a warrant to search Adam's home once again, this time with an acute focus on his study, the one place that had remained untouched and off-limits during previous searches. When the officers arrived, what they discovered there would change everything. Hidden beneath the floorboards of his study, in a compartment carefully concealed behind a false panel, they uncovered the most damning evidence yet. The compartment contained the original letters Adam had sent to the police, each one written with meticulous care, along with drafts of the riddles that had confounded investigators for years. The precision of the handwriting, the style of the clues, all matched the letters sent during the murders, unmistakably tying Adam to the gruesome crimes. But the most shocking find was a custom chess set, exquisitely crafted and clearly personal to Adam. It was missing 5 pieces, the very same number of victims in the case. The chess pieces were absent, but the subtle symbolism was impossible to ignore. Adam had been playing a game, and each murder had been a calculated move. The final blow came when investigators dusted the letters for fingerprints. Adam's prints were all over them, clear and undeniable, a fingerprint of guilt that could no longer be denied. For Margot, this was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. The pieces had fallen into place, and the chessmaster's identity had been revealed. Adam, the child prodigy turned reclusive researcher, had orchestrated one of the most brilliant, terrifying killing sprees in recent memory. His genius had been his curse, and now, finally, he would face the consequences of his twisted game. Margot stood over the chessboard of her investigation, victorious, but the cost had been high. Lives lost, families shattered, and a mind twisted by ambition and delusion. Yet, in the end, justice would prevail. Adam's trial was nothing short of a media spectacle. It captivated the nation, drawing attention from every corner as the prosecution and defense went head-to-head in a battle of intellects. Adam, the brilliant but cold mastermind, sat at the center of it all, his calm demeanor never wavering. His defense team clung to the argument that the evidence against him was circumstantial, a mere collection of coincidences and assumptions. But despite their best efforts, the prosecution's case was airtight, each piece of evidence stacking upon the other, creating a damning portrait of the man known as the chessmaster. Throughout the trial, Adam never once broke his stoic silence. He refused to confess, even in the face of irrefutable proof. Instead, he maintained an air of superiority, as if the entire proceedings were beneath him, a game he had already won in his mind. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were laced with condescension, as if he were imparting wisdom to a world too simple to understand his genius. His arrogance was palpable, his belief that he was untouchable undeniable. In 2006, after weeks of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty on 5 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as Adam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There would be no chance for him to outsmart the system, no last-minute moves to escape his fate. In the end, Adam was locked away, his intellect bound by the walls of a maximum security prison. But even behind bars, his mind continued to torment those who studied his case. Criminologists and psychologists alike obsessed over Adam's motives, delving into the intricacies of his twisted mind. They debated his reasoning, trying to understand the driving force behind his actions. Was it pure narcissism, a need to prove his superiority? Or was there something deeper, a philosophical belief that only the brightest minds should be allowed to thrive, and the rest should be eliminated for the greater good? The discussions seemed endless, as if trying to decipher Adam's logic could somehow bring clarity to the madness he had unleashed. For Margot, the resolution of the case was bittersweet. She had solved the Cambridge enigma, uncovered the chessmaster's identity, and brought justice to the victims, but it had come at a heavy cost. The lives lost, the bright, promising futures that had been extinguished, could never be restored. The families who would forever grieve the loss of their loved ones had found no true closure, and Margot herself couldn't shake the haunting image of Adam's calculating, indifferent face. The chessmaster's story serves as a chilling reminder of the lengths some will go to assert their perceived dominance, to bend the world around them to their will. Adam's high IQ and meticulous planning had allowed him to elude justice for years, each murder a masterstroke in his twisted game. But in the end, even the most cunning criminals can be outplayed, and no matter how brilliant one might be, there is always a move that can lead to their downfall. Margot knew that, in this case, justice had prevailed, but it had come at a great cost, and the memory of the chessmaster would haunt her for years to come.